Emotional intelligence is having self-awareness, it's emotional regulation, it's empathy, motivation, and then the skills. We've been talking a lot about the skills. All those things we just talked about were skills. You have to have awareness that you would like to have an aura or perception of your personality, which is incredibly important, right? Because all those confident people that you see is because they're very confident in their personality. Are they very confident they're perfect? No. Are they very confident they're going to do everything right? Absolutely not. But they are very confident and they know who they are. There is that part. And that is the authenticity that goes across everything. And then the body language, like you were saying. So because they don't feel prepared internally, everything gets put externally, the way in which they sit, the way in which they speak, the way in which they hold themselves, right? So about 75 to 90% of our communication is done non-verbally.
Who tend to pick up where Steve Jobs left off.
Yeah.
So basically his presentations usually were like very slowed down.
Very slow.
He would walk around, he would speak a couple of words and he would take his time and, showcase his product.
Yeah.
So people have constantly been telling me that, go slow, pick your words, say less words. How do you think this fits in the whole scenario? Hello everyone. Welcome again to Life Unscripted. Today I have a very special guest for you, Taylor Elizabeth. Taylor is a mentor, a coach who deals with mindfulness, mental health, emotional health, and etiquette. All in all, she's someone who actually believes in personality development. It's us who comes first. It's you who comes first. It's all about you. The rest can wait. So let's dive deeper into what it takes to build a personality that can be reckoned with. And let's understand the small things that makes you a better person on a daily timeline. Welcome, Taylor.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being on this podcast and taking the time off. Just for our listeners, Taylor has flew specifically for this from Dubai so that she can share her ideas and what she does for all those high-level personalities, high-level CEOs, children. I mean, she starts teaching people all about health, mental health, and how you can build your personality from ground up on day one. So Taylor, thank you so much once again.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it.
I believe that it is something which is due for a long time. I did have an opportunity to speak to you before, and I was so amazed by your journey, which I believe you can share with our listeners here. That why did you get into such a space where nobody wants to talk about it? We all feel that there's a need. We all feel that we need to be taught how to be more mindful at times and how to be more confident. I mean, we do portray we are confident, but at the same time, we are nervous as hell. Like sitting right here, I mean, it would not be 100% true if I say that I'm not even nervous like 10%. So how did you get into this space?
Thank you. Well, first, we'll just tackle the nervousness. So you're nervous because you care about it, right? If you didn't care about it, then that's when we should be a little bit worried, right? Because it's your podcast. So that you're nervous, it's great. And nerves are a great thing. It's when it's starting to limit in limitation to our life. That's when we have to be a little bit more concerned about it. So how I got into this is actually, I came into it through the etiquette, which is the behavior way, into then the mindset way. So I'll talk a little bit about my background. My background is in international business, actually. I used to do international public relations in 22 different countries around the world. I used to work with heads of state, CEO level, very, very key and select people for the university, kind of promote the university through building relationships. And I did that for many, many years. And then I had a family, and then it wasn't possible anymore to travel like that, although I do love it. And I have to say, my daughter asked me the other day, like, what I loved when I was a child that I still love now. And I would say, well, obviously people and obviously animals and obviously, family and things like that. But what I really love and have always loved is travel. And so I did that through my career, and I'm still doing it now. As you said, I came from Dubai to come here, and I spent quite a bit of time in India. So I would say, like, how did I get into this is what I felt when I was working with all these different nationalities, all these different cultures, is it wasn't necessarily the verbal communication. It was more what was not being said. It was more the etiquette. It was more the respect. It was more the graciousness that was there. And so I decided when I had the chance and when I wanted to reinvent myself into another career, I would go back to school and get a formal diploma in etiquette. So I went back to school and got a formal diploma in etiquette. And then I sat on it actually a little bit. This is something we didn't discuss. So I just sat for a little bit on it because I wasn't sure what to do with it, because I didn't want to just teach behavior, because teaching behavior is I teach you like a tool of something. I teach you like how to do something. But at the same time, if I don't shift your mindset, if there isn't something else there, because everything starts with your mind. Everything starts with the way you think about something. From that thought comes your emotions, then the behavior, and then the outcomes. Now the behavior is the etiquette. So if I really want to make a fundamental change, I really need to deal with the mind more. And so what I did was I went back and got a formal diploma in emotional intelligence coaching, in life coaching, as an NLP practitioner, which is neuro-linguistic programming, and then also as a positive psychology coach. So I went back and got all of these things to try to approach the question of the mindset, because I really think if you want any kind of change and you want to really focus and build yourself by investing in the way you present yourself, by the way you behave, by the way you dress, by the way you carry yourself, if you want to be more confident, you have to start with your mind first. And so that's how I got into it. And it kind of has organically grown since then. I think it's something I've always been really passionate about, is understanding self. I'm very curious as a human being. I'm very curious about when I meet other people. I always just want to know, politely. I want to know everything about that person, because there's something I can learn about that person, about myself, and about a situation. And so I'm always totally into it. And so I think once this ball started rolling when I started getting a formal education in this, it just hasn't stopped. And I'm always being said, my team is always telling me, what's the next degree? What's the next thing? What's the next challenge? Because I love to learn. And so that's how I got into this.
So, like with all your travels, meeting different people from different cultures with different beliefs, and I believe that when you meet people with different belief system, the kind of confidence and the personalities they portray is again different as a whole. So, when dealing with people from different background and understanding the power of personal development and the confidence that they execute, and then mixing it all together so as to be confident enough yourself to deal
Yes.
with them, how did you wrap your mind around all these cultures and teaching them at the same time?
Thank you for this. This is a fantastic question. So thank you so much. The first is that I always meet people where they are. So which means we all have bias, right? So we're all coming into bias. It's impossible as human beings not to have bias. To be as conscious as you possibly can of that bias is a huge asset in your life to learn. So as any leader, any CEO, anybody, doesn't even matter, even if you're not working whatsoever, if you can try to approach the world and life you live in, know that everything you're seeing, you're approaching it with bias, because that's the way our brain is kind of programmed, and to know that. So when I'm going into different cultures, I have some idea of cultural norms. So cultural norms are, for example, the way in which cultures communicate. Are you, for example, is it more aggressive and assertive, or is it more passive and timid? Is it more collective versus individualistic as a society? I mean, we know all these things. This is data, if you will, and past experience. But I take all of that and I allow it behind what the human being that's sitting in front of me. And so what I do is I always meet the person where they are. So I try to see this as another human being, and they're trying to communicate something to me. And then I allow, through active listening, which is listening to understand, not to respond, what they're trying to communicate to me. But then I'm not just noticing the words that they're using, which is the neuro-linguistic programming. And I'm not just noticing how they're communicating verbally, but also what their body language is telling me. And those things it's like data sourcing a little bit. Like it's giving me affirmation on, okay, so this is going towards cultural norm and standard. This is going towards, I guess, that bias that I may have already had. It's supporting it. So which is telling me something about, that's my thought. And it's telling me, okay, I'm going to behave in this way because I know this is going to be more receptive. Do I stick to that plan 100% every time? No, because you have to be intelligent enough to vary it and to make sure that you are trying to be effective in your communication. So by active listening and listening to what they're saying, by using different tools that I know from dealing with different cultures, by engaging with different cultures and from past experience, but being very, very aware that I want to meet that human being where that human being is, to really understand them and to try to really meet them there. That's where I always start. And it does vary. Again, there are some cultural norms. When you go into a more Asiatic country, you have more collectivism versus more individualism. Those are generalizations, okay? But even within that, it varies greatly, right? And then there are different etiquette rules on how to do business. There are ways you pass your business card. There are ways in which you make eye contact or you don't. There's ways of greetings. Those are like, that's data and tools that you have. But really reading people, which is a huge skill for CEOs, by the way, reading people and really understanding them, you take yourself out of it. You almost take all of that out of it and you just see that human being, and then you let whatever that human being is presenting to you dictate how you decide to move forward versus the other way around.
So when you say that you actually behave and you understand the cultural norms and that's how you try to connect with the person, I mean, there are thousands, if not more, if not less, sorry, of cultures in the world. And
Yes.
as you have said that you have traveled a lot and absorbed all the learnings that came along with it. How long did it take for you to reach in a situation where you could actually, okay, you met a person from an Asiatic country, you met a person from India, and at the same time you met somebody from Latin America, and so have that understanding to flip the switch
Yeah.
and get in the moment and get in the discussion and connect with the person.
Yeah.
So I want to know, how long did it take for you to reach there? The kind of cojones, the kind of mental strength that it required, because I believe that people in today's day and age, they are looking for shortcuts.
Yes. Yes.
So if you could share a bit more on that.
Yeah. So I'll give you the answer to that is that yes, it does take time because it's exposure, right? So there's the way you develop a new skill is you have awareness that you need to develop it, or maybe you have an absolute opposite end of that where you don't actually have any awareness whatsoever. And it just kind of comes through experience. Experience tells you need to develop the awareness. So it's either one of the two different parts of it. So there have been times where I realize, okay, I know nothing about this particular culture before I go into. I need to study up. I always do that. Always be prepared. That's like always be prepared is a good thing, both mentally, data wise, but also self wise as you can be. So that's the first part. But also I have to say, yes, it does take time with experience over years, and I did it for 13 years. So with time, you develop a bit. More importantly, I think if you keep a flexible mindset, meaning if you don't get rigid in that, oh, I know this and I understand this, or, oh, it's this culture, it's going to be this way. And you actually get into it where you were like, oh, that's interesting. So when something comes up that's different, that's not in that norm, instead of having a rigid mindset where I don't flexibly just adjust to it or just have confidence enough in myself to adjust to it, but I stick rigidly to what that culture is supposed to be, I got away from that pretty quickly. So that would be my tip to anybody that is afraid of what I'm saying is going to take them like 15 years to develop it, to really be honing the skill. Like any skill you practice takes time and exposure. I mean, if you're rapid fire going to all these different countries, you're going to get it really quickly. For me, it was like every single month for 13 years. So, I mean, I would say like after a year or two of doing it, it was pretty, I pretty much had it. But I think more importantly than the amount of time, it's the mindset that you go in with it. So if you meet a culture and you think, okay, for example, the Indian culture, and the culture that I absolutely adore and love, and I've been coming here for 15 years now. If I can go in there, and there are certain things about the Indian culture that I will expect. I will expect the warmth. I will expect a very welcome from people. I will expect a lot of color in the culture, but I don't just mean by the clothes. I mean in diversity of it. I will expect all these things. I will expect a certain way of speaking to me than maybe not. Like, for example, in a Japanese culture, I will expect maybe a different hierarchical structure than I would if I'm in China, for example, or if I'm in the United States. I will expect all these different things. But if something isn't quite where I expected it, instead of having that throw me off and not be able to communicate and not be able to develop that relationship better, I've developed a mindset and shifted mindset where I say, okay, something that kind of rubs the wrong way, instead of being like, okay, I'm going to close off on this and I'm not going to lean into it, I'll be like, that's interesting. I'm curious about that. That's interesting. Let me put this back here and let me just roll with it. I've built the confidence over time to just say, I know I can roll with it. But at the same time, I've also developed the mindset of I'm not going to stick rigid in this because you're going to be proven wrong, right? Something is going to show you that, no, it's actually not that way. So you better be flexible with things. That's my biggest tip.
So you mentioned about CEOs, leaders, and how cultural changes can mean a lot to them, and that's how you deal with them. So let's deep dive a bit into leadership and talk about personality and confidence.
Sure.
So I think in today's day and age, everything has become more about personality. How you portray yourself on social media, or how do you do your PR, and everybody wants to be that gimmicky PR thing.
Yeah.
So what kind of role does personality actually play, and what kind of role does confidence add to those personalities? Like when we talk about senior leadership, and how can one be more confident in such situations?
Okay, so how do you portray yourself? What I'm understanding the question to be is like, how do you have your personal brand? Like, how do you have a really
not just
strong...
a personal brand, your aura, your whole personality. How do you come across as a person?
Yes. Okay, so your personality is comprised of either it's naturally born, so that's part of it. So it's your nature. And then it's your nurture, it's your environment as well. So it's your mindset. It's the way you think about things. It's the way in which you behave. It's the way in which you respond to things. If you want a shift in that, because for whatever reason you find it's not where you want it to be. So for example, for any CEOs or leaders out there that are listening to this and they want to shift that or they want to grow that and develop that, then they need to lean into understanding what area it is that they want to develop in that. Because if they want it to be perceived as an aura and they want it to be consistent across all platforms, in person, when they're leading teams, when they're in press, when they're on social media or whatever else they may be doing, if they want that to be consistent, they need to have authenticity. And in order to have authenticity, they need to actually understand and know who they are. And in order to do that, they have to really come to full awareness of self, which is really uncomfortable, right? This is that personality. This is the answer to your question about personality. That's how you fully develop your personality. Is you have to come to the awareness of what is really going on within your personality. Because again, your personality comes from your natural inclination. So for example, are you an introvert or an extrovert? Like this is, can be a nature kind of situation. It also can be very heavily influenced by nurture, by your environment as well, cultural environment, family environment, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to come to awareness and not necessarily acceptance, but acceptance of where it is at that moment, and then make the steps to develop it. So you have to lean into choice of, so what I always say to all of my clients is you have to have awareness. Awareness is that you would like to have an aura or perception of your personality, which is incredibly important, right? Because all those confident people that you see is because they're very confident in their personality. Are they very confident they're perfect? No. Are they very confident they're going to do everything right? Absolutely not. But they are very confident and they know who they are. There is that part. And that is the authenticity that goes across everything. So if you want to develop that personality and you want it to be authentic and you have to lean into figuring out what is yourself. So you have the awareness that there is something there that is maybe inhibiting that's stopping you from developing it the way you want. So you have the awareness, but it's not just the awareness, as we talked about before. Awareness is about 60 to 70% of it. If you don't have awareness, you're blind to it. And that's not good at all for development, not for personal development. You need the awareness. Then you have to have the consciousness. The consciousness is when you decide to make a choice, which is the last part. You make a choice to lean into it. So you have awareness, consciousness, and choice. Now that choice to lean into it may be that you educate yourself. For example, you start doing a lot of work on self. This can be through journaling. This can be through reading. This can be taking through courses. This can be joining leadership programs. I mean, there's a lot of different things. You can have a coach. You can work with a coach to try to develop it. But that kind of blind area that you have now awareness and consciousness of it, you have to make a change and a choice, an active choice to develop it, to shift that personality, to make sure that personality is as confident as it can be and therefore consistent across all your platforms.
So let's consider that we have an entrepreneur who has just been in the CEO position, and now that person is supposed to exude confidence.
Yes.
So what are the challenges that comes along with portraying yourself confidently, like speaking, communicating confidently, at the same time the body language, the etiquette that you require so as to portray that confidence wherever you go?
Yes. Thank you for this, because this is actually, I work with a lot of CEOs this way. I work with a lot of CEOs that have done startups or that have their startup, which is their engineer background. Okay, so we'll walk through this journey here a little bit. They're engineers.
I would also like to touch doctors in this.
Yeah, also doctors. Doctors or engineers, either one of those two. So yeah, for example, in biotech and things like this, we have a lot of engineers or in the tech kind of field that they have created something, an amazing product or company, and it has grown, and then it's bought by a larger company. And then now all of a sudden, by contract or by choice, they are now the CEO of their original company. And so as a result, they have now gotten to a point where they do not have the skills, that they've not developed the proper skills to be in that kind of position. And so therefore, because they haven't developed it either through experience, because it went very fast, or through programs like MBA programs or executive leadership programs, or through investment of time, or through having a coach, again, for example, they're in this position where they really feel like they're, as we would say, like a duck out of water is what we would say in the United States. Like they're really, really not prepared for where they need to be. And so they don't feel confident in what they're doing. And so what happens in those situations is, because they don't come from a background where communications was particularly heavy, or engagement or team leadership even was particularly heavy, because they're really used to working a very certain way with a very certain demographic of people, right? So initially they were leading or working with other engineers, for example, which the communication is pretty much similar. The outcome is pretty much similar. The management style is pretty much consistent and similar as well. And then now all of a sudden they have to deal with all these different constituents. They have to deal with the press. They have to deal with senior leadership. totally different, right? So they don't feel like they're prepared enough. So that's one issue when it comes to it. They don't have the communication skills, the actual skills. They don't have the management skills necessarily either, or the mindset for it. And then the body language, like you were saying. So because they don't feel prepared internally, everything gets put externally, the way in which they sit, the way in which they speak, the way in which they hold themselves, right? So about 75 to 90% of our communication is done non-verbally. Non-verbally is your body language and your tone, mainly, those two things. Majority of it is body language. This is the way human beings are wired just for survival's sake. So, for example, modern society has gone very, very quickly. In the case of like over evolution. Evolution has been, we used to wake up one day and we had to literally fight for our lives every single day. And we're not doing that every single day. It may feel like that in the corporate world. It may feel like every day you're fighting for your life, but it's not like that anymore. But our mind is still wired the same way, meaning it's looking at something and from a distance or as far as it can, it's going to be judging. Are you a foe? Are you a friend? Is this safe for me? Is this good? Can I trust what I'm seeing or not? Right? Because it's for survival. In that CEO situation, it's the same thing where if that CEO can't stand up there and have with confidence the way they're communicating through tone, but also through body language, the confidence that needs to be there, the engagement, be able to build rapport with other people, being able to create a positive and conscious culture in the workplace, all these different things. If they can't do that and they'll start exhibiting it through their body language, then they've lost the battle already before they've said anything. Or the contrary, maybe they have that mindset. Maybe they have the ability to communicate with people through words, but the body language is saying something totally different, or the tone is saying something totally different. And so they're also failing before they start because people won't actually hear the message. Because again, there's only that, let's just say there's only like 10% really that you're listening to the message. It's everything else first. So you have to kind of get people buy-in first and then they'll hear the message. So this is often how with CEOs, the concept of importance of confidence and personality is like confidence, personality, and like what do you do if you're an entrepreneur or a CEO or whatever you're doing? You need to be able to develop those skills.
So let's now paint a picture and become a bit more practical about it. So consider a fresh CEO, first time CEO has to address a crowd, and he's sitting on a couch and he has the mental scenario going well for him. He has prepared well, prepared multiple times, I would say. Now, can you give us 3 or 4 things in his body language, or maybe the style of speaking, speak fast, slow, sit uptight, sit with legs crossed?
Sure.
Or how should he portray himself? Like, let's give some practical tips to the listeners.
Yeah, of course. So my tips are be prepared for sure. And I'm sure he is or she is by the background of it, but also mentally be prepared. And these are some things you can do about that. So there is visualization, which is visualizing. This is for those CEOs or entrepreneurs that don't really feel comfortable in this role, right? And if you feel nervous, like you said in the beginning, it's because you care about it. Nerves are great. It's when it's not in balance. It's when you feel like your body is doing one thing and your mind is doing something else. We want those to get as close as they possibly can together so you can be most effective. So you want to be prepared in the sense of get your mind in the right place. So visualize your success, breathing exercises. See the space even before you get up on that stage. I know that's hard for CEOs. I know it's hard for executives to take that time out, but if you can see it or have your team even go take a photo of it so you can see it, mentally this prepares you so much better. So be prepared in that way. When you are sitting there, the best thing you can do, and if I wish I could demonstrate, we're not like in full, is you want to sit open as much as you can, right? And you want to sit as engaged as much as you can. So engaged means sitting slightly forward. Like, when we're talking to each other, we're leaning into each other. We're engaged because this is interesting, right? Otherwise, neither of us would be here, right? So we're engaged. So we want to lean in. You want to sit as open as possible. So don't slouch down. Also, don't lean back. I don't know if anybody that was watching, if you watch me move back, it's like all of a sudden I make a break. Now, if you're in a room of 250 people or 300 people, it's difficult to create rapport and connection with them.
Yeah.
You have to be able to sell it from the minute that you're up there, and you have to keep them as engaged as you possibly can. So when you're just sitting on this couch and you're waiting, you're already starting that. You're already making the impression. So make sure you're leaning in, that you're engaged, that whoever is talking, if it's not you, that you're looking at them and you're listening, or you're making eye contact with the crowd. You're getting them engaged in what you're doing. No closed body language, meaning try not to close your body off like this. This is actually, I know we see this a lot on like Time magazine.
Everywhere.
This one, I have to say, this stance is actually a closed-bodied stance. This actually means I am closing myself off to you, right? I am putting a barrier between you and I. I know it looks like confidence, but it's not actually confidence. So I would try to not do that. Again, lean forward, breathing. You can sit, if you're really nervous, there are things you can do. You can keep your hands in certain positions, if you will. That will help with your energy flow and getting yourself centered and calm. I often find putting both feet on the ground in front of you and making sure that you are grounded. I know this also is very helpful as well. But breathing, visualization, grounding, keeping your body language open. And then when you get up there with tone, please be careful about monotone. Or the opposite, please be careful about yelling. We would say preaching. When you get up there and it's and it really feels like preaching. There's a time and place for that preaching part. There's never a time and place for monotone. If you stand up with monotone and imagine that you're there and everybody's supposed to be listening to you and what you're supposed to be saying is so important. If you can't care enough to show inflection and interest and engagement through your own voice and your own tone, I do coach a lot on this as well, then why should they listen to you, right? It's again, you're before you even get a message out, you're shooting yourself in the foot, as we say, because you're not using all the tools you possibly can. So try to be as engaging with the way you use tone. I'm not talking to you totally monotone. If I was giving this whole interview like this, you would not have me on this show. They'd be like, I never should be on anyone's show, right? So there's that. And then the speed. So depending on where you are, it's somewhere around between 135 and 150, 160 is what you should go for words per minute. It can be a little faster than that if you're really engaging and dynamic and if the topic is very intense, but nothing lower. So not in the 130s and not anything higher. So try to aim for that. And how you figure that out is you literally just practice your speech, record or have somebody record 1 minute of it, and then just see how many words are there. And that's your words per minute. It's a really simple process. There's apps too that can do it.
I mean, this is quite interesting. So you just said 130 to 150 words per minute.
Yeah.
But nowadays I have met a lot of tech CEOs who tend to pick up where Steve Jobs left off.
Yeah.
So basically his presentations usually were very slowed down.
Very slow.
He would walk around, he would speak a couple of words and he would take his time and, showcase his product.
Yes.
So people have constantly been telling me that, go slow, pick your words, say less words. How do you think this fits in the whole scenario?
I think it depends on who you are first, because this is Steve Jobs, right? So we would all like to be Steve Jobs, at least the professional aspect of him. We all would like to be there. I don't
Definitely.
The EQ quotient, I'm not 100% sure, but at least that part, everyone would want to be that. Also what he's selling, the product itself, because there were a lot of visuals, right? When he was doing that, there were a lot of visuals, or there's a lot of dynamic going on. So as long as you're creating dynamic and engagement, then you're doing well. Also his body language was very much a part of it, nonverbal communication. If you are speaking though, I would say if you are presenting, yes, you should always, this is in the practice part, making sure there are worlds behind words. Not one word means the same thing to another person, and not one word carries the same weight as another one. So make sure, your words definitely matter. So you should be choosing your words. You should not be going so fast that you're losing people. Again, knowing your audience, if it's not the same language as your mother tongue, then be wary of that as well. But I would say, I would still stick to 130, 150 range, because it sounds like that's a lot of words per minute. But then if you actually see what that sounds like, if you go less than that, it is really, really slow, unless there's something really dynamic going on.
Something engaging,
or it could be a strategy if it works for you. Again, I think that some of this is trial and error.
Yeah, definitely.
Better trial internally than externally, just from an XPR person standpoint, because that's very hard to undo once it's out there. But I mean, you can trial and error a little bit, and also just having confidence to trial and error, because trial and error is how you're going to learn something. Failure, which I personally don't believe exists. So I don't think failure exists. What failure only exists then is if you decide not to learn from it. If you decide not to grow from it, then it exists. If you decide to lean into it and grow from it, then it's actually just the opportunity. That's usually the catalyst for a lot of our change and a lot of our development if you have the right mindset with it. So I would say, try, learn, and always grow.
So one last thing, I know I'm pushing this a bit more.
Please.
One last thing is now, for example, you have your tone right.
Yes.
You have your work right. You have your prep right.
Yes.
But the crowd is multicultural.
Yes.
So probably from different countries, maybe like a boardroom with different people from different backgrounds,
Yes.
male, female, ethnicity, and cultural backgrounds. Now, how do you portray yourself confidently? Because I have absorbed how a person X, person Y behaves or thinks.
Yes.
But now when I have to address them together, it is a whole new game.
Yes.
And I didn't prepare for that.
Yes. Yes. So this is where EQ plays a huge part of this. And this is where I wish I could give you a magic like equation. Like this is it. And you have to do this. This again, it's a little bit of that trial and error thing, but it's also developing your emotional quotient. So your emotional intelligence part, which is being able to, emotional intelligence is, just for everybody's sake here, emotional intelligence is having self-awareness, it's emotional regulation, it's empathy, motivation, and then the skills. We've been talking a lot about the skills. All those things we just talked about were skills. Really being able to read a room. It's a huge, 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 huge thing for CEOs, for any leaders. Successful leaders all can read a room. Reading a room means they're going to go in with it with some kind of a mindset of like, this is the objective of what I'm trying to achieve. This is whom I think I'm giving it to. Now, if you get in front of those people and you realize, wait a minute, this is like totally different, then your flexibility of mindset and your confidence in your ability to do it, you will adjust to it. Now you adjust through it and you start, for example, when I go and give a lecture to 500 people, which is quite often, or 250 or whatever it is. And I'm in Dubai or I'm in India. It's actually very diverse. It's always pretty diverse, right? It's very rare that I get a pretty uniform crowd anywhere. So that being said, what I do is I just read the room. So I started off in a certain way. Human beings, all they want to, and I'm going to get into a little bit of psychology here, but human beings, all they want to do is they want to be seen, they want to be heard, and they want to feel safe. And I don't necessarily mean physically safe. I mean, they want to be able to feel that they're engaged enough that they can share, or in some cases physically safe, but share. They want to feel in this way. This is a human condition. We are all humans in that room. I don't care if you came from one continent or another, if you are one gender or another, if you have a background in this or that, we're all human beings. So they all want that. So I always start everything with being as engaging as I possibly can, which means I show openness. I use a certain tone that's engaging. So I start from as high as I possibly can. And then I start to read the room in the way I'm going. So if I feel like I'm losing people because I'm going too quickly, for example, or because the language I'm using, it's not resonating. And you can see, now this is where EQ becomes really important because you start reading other people's facial expressions. Your eyes will never lie, will never lie. Now people's face, the mouth, like when it talks can lie, right? But the mouth, you can do a fake smile, but the eyes will never lie. The eyes will move up. When somebody's actually engaged, you will see eye changes. You'll see direction movement. When somebody's actually happy, the whole thing will shift up or shift down, conversely. It will never lie. It's like when somebody, if we go back with our moms, when an auntie was coming over, okay, and you didn't really want to see this auntie, and your mom better put a smile on your face, and all of a sudden, this didn't change, but it's like that's what that is, okay. So and you can
clown face,
clown face, and you can read it, and if you get really good at reading a room, reading people, you will, because the brain is incredibly intelligent. We do not give the brain, and we don't give ourselves enough. A huge element of confidence building is giving yourself grace and believing in yourself, in your ability to be flexible with things. So if you have that confidence to do it and you're reading the room appropriately, your brain will do it because it's like you've given them the right pathways to be able to do it. And the more experienced you become with this, the better you'll be able to do it. So take any experience you can to get in front of a room of people and try to speak. Although I have to tell you, public speaking is the number one fear around the world. Number one. So when I'm saying this to everybody that's listening, they're probably like, there's no way that's happening. I'm never going to volunteer to do that, right? But I'm telling you, the more you do it, the more you wire your brain, the more confidence you give yourself because you've done it, and the more ability you've been able to learn how to read a room in real time, which is really important.
So we have just spoken about personality development. We have actually gone through the whole process of, how a person who is now at a spot where he needs it right now can, bring it up to speed and, portray himself as a personally confident person. Now, the question comes that when you're building such a personality, there's a lot of things that you're going to be learning and experiences you're going to be absorbing. So as I mentioned, the thing about Steve Jobs.
Yes.
So you look at that video and you feel that this is the right way. You take some elements of it, which you can remember, and you start speaking a certain way. Probably, let's say you hear somebody else talking, or you have a lot of examples. So let's talk about Modi ji, the Indian Prime Minister.
Yes.
So you might want to take up his style of speaking. So ultimately, you're diluting your own personal touch in your personality.
Yes.
So how do you think one can learn from all the experiences and all the conversations that's happening around him, absorb all the good things about it, but still have an authentic personality for themselves?
Yes. Okay, that's like fantastic question. So the first thing is I think it's, you have to tune a lot out first. So when things are coming to, for example, Modi ji or any other leader or any other, for example, a president of a country, or if you're even a business leader, there's something about their style that's drawing a curiosity in you, because that's basically what it is, or interest, or if you think, okay, that's working, don't just say, that's it, I'm going to take it and I'm going to run with it. Ask yourself, what is it? Not why. Why is a very like A to B. It gets you A to B, and it will not get you the whole room around it. You need to be able to see the whole thing, really think about it. What exactly about that is appealing? What about that is engaging? And if I were to use this myself, would this be reaching my objective, right? Is this an objective I want? So I always work backwards with all the people that I coach, also with myself, is I always work objective focused. So I would like to achieve this. So what do I need to do? And everything comes down to, okay, one, knowing of self and development of self. So, and that, as I said before, developing authentic personality does not necessarily mean that you decide that this personality is what it is, and then it just stays that way forever. Like it's fixed. Nothing in life is fixed. Like that's what I think is like, there's no certainty in life. That's the only thing that's certain, right? Just like your personality, you have your character, which is your ethics and your morals, and that's something else. That's a part of it, but it's something else. Your personality and how you decide to portray yourself. You have full choice over how you want to do that. It has to resonate with you because it has to be authentic. So you can't start picking from all these different people that you find inspirational. So don't just pick that and adopt it. Actually ask yourself, okay, what is my objective? I would like to be this type of person, or this is how I want to be coming across. This is how I want to be seen. This is what I want to be known for. So I want my reputation to be. This is how I want to behave. This is how I want to communicate. This is etc. If that's the case, then where do I need to start? It always starts with the way you're thinking, always. So how am I thinking about things, right? And am I thinking, and then how am I behaving, communicating? And then that's where you can use these inspirations as, maybe I could try this in that. But the fundamental, the way you think, your mindset, the way that has to be a certain way. And you have to develop that yourself. You have to choose that. And you have to come to, I want to reach this objective. I have to be thinking this way, because from that comes everything else. And then once you've thought a certain way, and once you have this mindset, trying out different things and different tools and different skills, it's a great idea. Like, for example, if you know somebody speaks a certain way, and you're like, I'm going to use that. I'm curious about that. I'm going to use that. Let me try it out. If you're very sure in what your objective is and how you want to come across, because you will test it against that. And if it doesn't fit to support that, then you won't adopt it, versus just blindly adopting. Because otherwise you're going to be totally overwhelmed with information also. Totally overwhelmed with stimulus, totally overwhelmed, and you'll be going nowhere. It's like all these different directions and you just stay in one place, right?
So like you're just trying to help us out and teach us, coach us,
Yes.
how to be more confident and how to develop a great personality. Was there an instance in your life where you had a mentor or a coach, help you out or get you started or get you, a slingshot forward
Yes. Yes.
in your journey?
Yes. So all coaches should have a coach, just like I believe all therapists and psychologists should have a therapist and psychologist. I think I have a coach. I've been working with a coach for many years. It's a very guiding light for me as a coach, but also as a human being. So I would say, yes, there has been significantly through my education process as learning my certification as a coach, but also just as I've grown as a businesswoman and as I've grown in what I'm doing as well. That's been incredibly helpful. I thinking about this, and I've thought about this. Personally, my mother has been one of the strongest examples for me as a mentor, as a human being. As somebody that, if you want to talk about developing one's personality, my mother has a very authentic, very graceful, very strong, where my brand, The Elegance Advisor, comes from, is very much inspired by her. Not for the external, although she is very elegant that way, but the way that she always held herself and the way she holds herself and communicates and things of that nature. That's mainly where it comes from, the being, the aura that she has, right? That's really the inspiration. But I had I've had amazing blessing of working with some very influential people. And I'm going to use that word influential because of the ability for them to make really wonderful and positive change in environments. And I have one in particular that I worked with where the style of communication was in a way that was so empowering for other people that they never felt like this person was their boss, but they clearly were the leader and you could feel it and you always knew it. And it was this really elevated conscious leadership. And I leaned into, at the time, and I was quite young at the time too. This is in the beginning of my career. I leaned into I leaned into what was being communicated by not being communicated. I leaned into the behavior. I leaned into some of the style of presenting and things like that. I questioned whether or not, can I do this? Is this going to be authentically me? Some of it was yes. Some of it I was like, no, this is not going to be it. But I really learned. And even more importantly, I learned from this person who was running a program that I was working for at the time. I learned from them how to really engage with other human beings, how to build relationships, how to really lead through them. So yeah, there definitely has been, but that has been continued. It's a continuous journey of growth. Every day I wake up and I think, okay, yesterday I could have done this differently to be more effective, right? To be what could have been more resourceful to me. I always ask myself, was that behavior, was that mindset, were those words, was that communication as resourceful as it could be? Not serving, because I think it can have a negative connotation, but was it as resourceful to what I'm trying to achieve? And as we talked about before, like what I'm trying to achieve is I'm trying to make positive impact and change in people's lives through not me giving them all the advice and the tools, but by empowering them to be able to really see that within themselves and to be able to get through any blocks that they're having, right? That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make positive change. I also work with a lot of students, as I mentioned, which is something that's really fulfilling to me, working with teenagers, because really to make a change at that time in their life is really impactful. So I say that's my objective. So every day I wake up and I'm like, how close was I to that objective or not? Okay, well, what could I have done better? Not, but I failed. I didn't fail, but what could I do better to be more resourceful to me moving forward? And like, not versus that, like guilt thing. I was actually just watching a series on this, like informative documentary series on the concept of shame and guilt and like how society can put that on you, just generally speaking, and in the business world also, right? So I was thinking like, I'm not putting that on myself. I'm also not, throwing rainbows around and saying I'm so wonderful either, because that's positive toxicity and that's not helpful either. But being realistic about it and leaning into growth and deciding to be graceful with myself, but also honest with myself. These are things that I do. And this is where I got this both from my current coach and also from the mentor and my mother. So all of them.
So you just mentioned a word called positive toxicity.
Yeah.
This is something which I've heard of quite often these days.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explore a bit more on this topic and tell us how much positivity starts becoming a bit more toxic?
Sure. So the best way this is a great topic. The best way that I can describe this is those T-shirts that you say where it says positive vibes only. The thing is that that's not real world. Like that's not real life. Like I am really, really optimistic and I am very positive and I'm a very upbeat person. I think this is my natural personality. To be very honest, I'll give you full disclosure. I think this is just kind of how I'm wired. I'm wired this way. However, does that mean I wake up every single day feeling like 100%? No, not at all. Do I feel setbacks and sadness and all these other things? Absolutely. Am I functioning at my top level of optimism and positivity all the time? No, but holding myself to some standard that I should feel that way when things are not going that way is not resourceful to me, right? Because what that does is it starts introducing these ideas of shame, of guilt, of repression of emotions, of not fully processing it, because I'm telling myself what I am feeling is wrong. And feelings are not right or wrong. They are just there. They are telling us something, and they are coming from our thoughts. So all of our feelings and our emotions, which are tied to our feelings, are coming from our thoughts. And we have our wonderful ability to be able to control all of our thoughts or manage all of our thoughts if we have a good idea of what's going on. Toxic positivity is telling us that when you start feeling something, you should just tell yourself the thought that you should be feeling something else, which means you're never actually getting to what is the underlying thought. So you're not really ever getting to what is really driving you, what is really happening. And therefore, you're never really dealing with it. So you're literally covering up everything with this positivity that's not authentic, it's not true, and it's actually quite damaging. So that's what toxic positivity is. It doesn't mean that something happens and you should just crumble from it. You do need to be resilient with it. But at the same time, you also do need to identify what's going on and allow the feeling so that you can address what's really going on with the thought so that you can change it. Otherwise, it'll just sit there. I mean, you'll still feel bad. Even if you say everything is wonderful, it's not really wonderful. Like life is not like that. So it's more about developing the tools on how to rethink it so that you can shift it and change it versus just covering it up with positivity.
So now consider that a person has built a good personality. They are decently positive. They're positive about the right things. They're emotionally
They're healthy.
They're healthy. And
Yes.
I think they've got the right things in place for them. Now, how do they leverage all this personality they have built up?
Yes.
So how do they leverage the personality and the communication skills and this journey which they have gone through,
Yes.
and to crack better deals or to build better relationships in general?
So I would say that those things will naturally happen because they've invested in doing it. So they would not have gotten to this point of healthy, positive personality if they hadn't invested in it,
Without
right?
setbacks.
Yeah, without setback. You cannot. It's not like you wake up one day like this, right? I mean, anybody, any CEO that's out there listening to us right now, or any business person knows you didn't just wake up and be like, "Oh, I had this amazing idea," and everything just fell into place, and wasn't it wonderful? Because it doesn't work that way. That's not life. That's not business. That's not reality. So if you got to that point, it's because you decided you had awareness that something needed to change, you had consciousness about it, and you decide to make that change, which means maybe you invested in it. Like I said, you got a coach. Maybe you decide to take some courses. You were reading. Reading is huge, by the way. I would definitely say reading about it. You use support groups, for example, throughout your peers, whatever that looks like for you. You did all those things. You decide to lean into those things that maybe you weren't fully comfortable with and needed the growth, right? So you got there. Naturally from that, your communications will improve, as we talked about, not just the nonverbal communication, but also you will read people better. So you'll be able to communicate. You will come across as more confident. So therefore you will better be able to engage and build rapport, build a positive work environment. It will naturally happen. Will it naturally happen? Like if you want to make that tenfold or exponentially better, then you have to continue to invest in those areas. So let's say that you want to, conscious leadership is a focus for you, or building a more positive culture, positive work culture, or if it's closing deals, right? So all deals, all they're about, and in most deals actually, this will surprise no Indian ever, but if we were not talking to the Indian community, is that most deals are brokered over meals, right? And why? Yeah, well, food is very important. But not only that, it's not about the deal. It's about the relationship that's underneath the deal. And food is a very big part of all relationships and all cultures, right? So if you want to broker better deals, you've already done your work by investing on being a better human being, by investing in yourself and all different tools, because you will be building stronger relationships. The key is there, if you want to close those deals, you need to build better rapport and you need to build better relationships. So whatever is limiting you to do that, is it your communications? Is it your body language? Is it your mindset? Is it whatever? Lean into those things and figure out the tools to do it, either again, through a coach, through reading, through groups, through advice from somebody that you trust that will give you honest feedback, getting feedback, getting a mentor, those kind of things. That's how you do it.
So can you share an example of one of probably your coaches or a person you have met throughout your extensive journey?
Yes.
Who has actually transformed his personality?
Yes.
And who became a better person, a better negotiator?
Yes.
Some of his negotiation tactics.
Yes.
And all in all, a great human being.
Yes. I would have to say I'm very happy to say that I have several. Of course, I can't use their names. So by confidentiality, I cannot use their names. I have several. So I'll talk about one here in India, actually, who has come to, their biggest concern was they were coming and they were taking over leadership. It was a family business. So they're taking over leadership. And their style of management and their style of being was very different from their fathers, okay, because it's a family business. Second generation. Yeah. Very different. Also, the educational background was very different as well, because, the founder of a company came into it, had an idea, developed something, and then the second generation gets educated in it, right? And so it's a different approach. When you have that plus the experience, it's like a very different approach to management and everything else. So they wanted kind of a change, but they didn't. Obviously, you can't just turn it on its head, right? It's not effective. It's also not going to be great for their bottom line or any of the deals that you want brokered. And plus, remember, the deals are relationship built, and the father built a lot of relationships. So how do you navigate both of those things? And so there was actually a lot of apprehension and fear. This person in particular felt very frozen in their ability to make change and to empower change and to feel empowered in their ability to do that as the new head of the company, right? Because the father is retired. I will put it like that.
And also the expectation pressure.
And expectation pressure. And so we worked together through what those limiting beliefs were, because there were a lot of limiting beliefs. As a coach, we worked through what the limiting beliefs are. We also worked through the different tools by limiting belief is something that is there because society has told you, an environment has told you, or you have told yourself about yourself, right? And there's a lot of things there because, again, difference of generations, different styles. How much is reality? How much is just the belief that you've given yourself? Like that's the first thing we work on. Bringing more mindful and consciousness, and then deciding also about style. And what is that leadership style going to be? And how are you going to approach it? Are you just going to steamroll this out? Or are you going to is it going to be a strategic rollout of how to do it and how to best get buy-in from doing it? So initially there was they were frozen actually initially. When I was brought into this, I was actually brought into it by a member of their family that was not this performer and not the person themselves, which is hard because with clients, I'm usually dealing directly with the client themselves. Sometimes I have junior bring me in for their fathers. That doesn't usually work that well, by the way, because you need buy-in, right? And in order to have buy-in, you have to have awareness that there's an issue, right? In this case, this person did know there was the awareness. The consciousness was there, but they just felt lost in what they were doing. And so from the beginning, they were able to, from that point, we were able to figure out what the limiting beliefs were, decide on a strategy, decide on how they want to present themselves, build up that personality a little bit more, or more authentically figure out how to communicate it. And then how are we going to roll this out? And now they're leading this company. I would say, financially, it's better than when the previous was there. It's continuing to grow. And more importantly, they feel very confident in their ability to do that. And the old generation and the current generation are doing very well together because it didn't just go from night to day. And it was a good, smooth transition where the now leadership feels confident in what they're doing. And I've done something similar also in Asian countries, which is very delicate, East Asian countries, which is very delicate because you have a lot of cultural things there as well, where they want to make a significant shift in the way in which the mindset of a business, right? The culture of a company. I worked in a tech company in Southeast Asia where there was a very big shift that needed to happen in a company, and the culture needed to shift. And it was very apparent the culture needed to shift because, again, if you don't have a positive or empowering work environment or culture, it can lead to breakdown in communications, which is a huge loss of revenue and a huge connection to turnover. And you want to reduce the turnover as much as you can because hiring and training people is a huge drain on any company. This was quite a big company. So I was brought in to work with the CEO on how are we going to shift in this culture? Like, what's the mindset shift going to be? And then how is this person going to build resilience in it so that they're able to deliver it? So both those ways I've worked with CEOs.
Still, the world is changing so rapidly. Like every day, new things are happening, new technologies are coming. I think new research is being done. What is that one skill you believe that going forward a person needs to incorporate in that personality?
Empathy.
Empathy, how? Give us a situation.
I think that as we move into new technology, which is like very AI heavy, right? Interesting thing about AI is that when they're writing AI and they're, especially the tools that we're using like this, the way that they actually work with neuro-linguistic practitioners to develop it, right? Because it's mastering of the words and the psychology behind it. So it's not just technology, like they're really trying to get into the minds of a human being. So I think anything that you develop, any skills that you develop that are building rapport with another human being, these are the skills of not just the future, but now. I know AI it's been here for quite some time. Now it's like accelerated. But this is what, for example, LinkedIn, several studies on LinkedIn, Harvard Business School, Stanford School, economics, they've been looking at this for quite some time. And even since like 2019, the biggest skills are communication skills. They are team building skills. They are empathy skills. So being able to build rapport with another human being. That's what I mean by empathy. Empathy is when we always say it's putting your foot in somebody else's shoe, right? That's a very simplistic way of doing it. Empathy is self-empathy. And then it's also understanding it in others, but really, really understanding them, the human condition of what that is. I don't mean going into somebody's psychology and saying, okay, well, you seem to have this and there's something there, but like really trying to like lean into the humanity of another human being so that you can better lead, so that you can be more effective, more resourceful in what you're doing. This is a huge skill. Collaboration is a huge skill. These are the skills really moving forward. Being able, again, because if you cannot build rapport with somebody, if you cannot communicate, even if you have the best idea and you cannot communicate it, or if you want to be able to build the most amazing team because you have the smartest team possible, but you cannot form a team because you can't form the bonds, then it's for naught. You know what I mean? You're not going to be as effective. So it's great to have all the tools and it's great to have all the ability and it's great to have the best people. But if you cannot create the network and the rapport and everything between them, and those are those soft skills. That's what we're talking about. So I think that those are the skills. That's empathy is one of them. Empathy, I think, is the baseline because it's for like all of them. If you want to build good communication, if you want to build good rapport, if you want to build good leadership, you need to be empathetic.
Don't you think that empathy and deeper communication are one and the same thing? Because like, if you have to have empathy, you got to be good at communication. You got to be able to understand what the other person is portraying.
Yes,
you got to be able to think from their perspective.
Yes. Yeah, they're definitely connected. And also understand their nonverbal communication as well. Like that's the other thing too about empathy is that when you're empathetic towards somebody, it's like really leaning into what they're going through. It's not just like, oh, I feel sorry for them or I feel badly. It's actually and it's not feeling their whole extent of their process either, because we could never do that because we're not in their brains, we're not in their hearts or anything else. But it does take that. Yes, it is communication skills. It is definitely part of it. I wouldn't say they're mutually exclusive or totally the same, but I think that yes, they're definitely connected.
How can one start with empathy? Like you are a very strong, confident, bold leader or a bold person in general. Now you actually want to be empathetic to the other person. You want to communicate with them at a deeper note.
Yes.
So what is that first step that you need to take towards empathy?
I think being really honest with yourself about who you are first. I think the strongest, boldest leaders, because again, there's a really big difference between assertive communication, which is bold, which can be very bold communication, and aggressive communication. Assertive communication is where the objective is to bring people in together. That doesn't mean that you're not correcting people. It doesn't mean that you're not having to deliver difficult news or that it's all nice and happy or whatever. It means that you are communicating something, but the objective is different. The intention is different. Assertive is to control and create fear. It's a very different intention. And one comes from a place of consciousness and of really being a leader, really a real leader, a conscious leader. And the other one comes from actually insecurity and a lack thereof. So it's like just like polar opposites. So people always have the question, like either you're born with empathy or you're not. You either have it or you don't, but empathy is a muscle that you develop and build like any skill. So it just means one, coming to the awareness of where are you in this empathy scale? And when something isn't resonating with you, like by resonating, just in case that's throwing people off, something happens and there is a really weird, awkward feeling you're having when I think everybody can relate to this, like that kind of like, you're not really sure what to do here. Like somebody's showing emotion or you don't know what to do. Or like there's something off, like you feel like there's a disconnect, you feel disconnected. These are two big signs that you should be developing your empathy. Not because you have to be living that experience for the other human being, but when you can relate to it, you'll feel stronger in knowing what to do, what to communicate, what to say, how to behave, kind of thing, if you understand it better. So lean into maybe where you are, for example, where you are with empathy and how to develop it. Put yourself in situations that challenge you in order to do it. Read. There's a lot about reading. Gratitude is a great way to get to empathy. So gratitude, being more aware of where you are and what you are grateful for, it gives you, gratitude is the best practice ever. If gratitude is every day I wake up, before I move out of bed, I always thank God for three things. Usually that I'm alive that day, which is fantastic, but then three things. And then I say, something positive or a prayer for somebody else to try to, because we're all interconnected as far as I'm concerned. So you say a prayer for something positive or whatever it is. But gratitude is a great way to build your self-awareness and where you are so that you can start in a place where you can continue to build that empathy, where you can continue to build those connections with other people. But it's a muscle. You have to, like going to the gym, you have to exercise it. You're not going to look like a bodybuilder if you don't actually work on it, right? It doesn't just happen.
You have to put the hours, you have to put the weight.
You have to put the weight in, yeah. And the thing about the gym, nobody wants to really go to the gym because you physically feel bad. People usually really don't want to sit with their thoughts and lean into their thoughts. In fact, there's been a study where they'd rather zap themselves, and create pain in their body than sit with themselves in silence with their thoughts. Right? So we usually don't want to do that. So lean into it. It's not easy, but it's important.
So we have spoken about so many things. We have spoken about how one can develop personality. We have spoken about how we can be authentic in our own personality. We have spoken about the need of empathy to be an effective communicator and to develop a reckoning personality. Now let's do some quick fire things so as to understand things in a more deeper manner, and so that we can understand how you came into this aspect and how you train your coaches. To begin with, how do you handle things or how do you stay motivated when you're having a bad day?
I give myself grace. I always tell myself, okay, this may not be my most amazing moment ever because I'm in a certain place. I'm honest with myself about where I am. I didn't sleep well last night. I have, I'm not well. I don't feel well, or maybe I'm overly stressed about things. I'm carrying a lot. I'm very consciously aware of where I am, because where I am is going to impact it. But I do have a choice over the thoughts that I'm having. So I give myself grace. Okay, this is where I am. Where I am, not, okay, maybe I'm not going to do my best. I don't do that to myself. I'm going to say, I'm still going to try my best, but I'm also going to give myself some grace because I'm human. I'm not going to add guilt or shame on top of what already is going on, because that's not going to serve me.
What do you think is the best way to unwind after the end of a very stressful and a heavy day?
I do a couple of different things. I meditate. I walk. I love walking. Walking is at nighttime. I actually walk in the morning as well, but at nighttime, and I also like, it's calming, very calming for me. And I actually love reading. So if I can read something or I have 3 dogs and a cat and I love them. I would have like hundreds, but my husband will not allow that. So there we are. Plus, I don't have the space for it. But I love them. So I will spend time with them or with my daughter.
One habit that you would recommend everybody start today to be more confident and build a very good personality?
Journaling. I think journaling is a wonderful habit. There's many different types of journaling, but if you really want to know where you are and where you're going and where you've actually been, journal, because especially reflective journaling. So like write where you are, write your thoughts, gratitude journaling, something, and then go back and read it, check in on it. That you'll see your growth and development. And also those things which you really want to work on will be really obvious to see if you reflect on it. Reflection through journaling.
To build on that journaling part, one book, because we have also spoken about reading and, to develop yourself. One book that changed everything for you, that added to your own personal development.
Emotional Intelligence by Golden.
Oh.
It's 1995. It is still used. I mean, granted, 1995 is not that long ago, but I mean, like, it's still used now. There are still editions coming out now. In fact, I think if I'm not mistaken, there's like a series of talks on this whole thing now, and not any other book has really come and taken its place. People have built off of it, but as a fundamental, I would say that one. Tipping Point is a really interesting one as well. Atomic Habits. Okay, so first, emotional intelligence first, just to get your foundation of what we're talking about. And then how you actually put that into play is Atomic Habits. I would say those 2.
3 things that you can tell our listeners if they want to be more confident in terms of their body language.
Yes.
3 things they should always keep in mind.
Don't close yourself off, please. Like, can we stop with this one? Again, unless your culture says no, make eye contact with people. Make sure you lean into people. Don't be on your phone when you're talking to people. And when you're eating at a meal, get the phone off the table. Okay? Because your meals are where most deals are brokered, and you will be distracted by your phone. And if you are not distracted by your phone, you are sending signals, subconscious and conscious signals to the other person that they're not as valuable as whatever's going on your phone, and you don't want to start a relationship that way.
3 elegant etiquettes one should follow to portray confidence.
Always engage more people. Listen more than you speak. You want to engage people and be elegant. Listen more than you speak. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Do it in that proportion. Always make people feel engaged and welcome. Use their name. Always use their name. First names. Yeah, first names. And repeat it as many times as you can reasonably within the conversation. And the eye contact and the body language being really engaging. But make it more about them. You will learn so much if you listen and make whatever conversation you're having more about the other human being than about yourself.
So after all this, all the journey that you have been through, the kind of experiences that you have gained, what takeaway would you want to give from your experience to all the listeners here? One takeaway that can transform their life starting today.
What you think you will become and what you think is what you are.
Like a long-term vision?
Every day. If you think you can do something, you will do it. This could be on a daily basis. This could be 5 years from now. This could be 10 years from now. If you tell yourself you will not do it, you will not do it. And the thing is that everything all your feelings, all your actions, all your outcomes come from those thoughts. So really invest in understanding what is going on with those thoughts. Now that sounds really simple, but your thoughts are coming from, again, your brain is wired a certain way and it's coming from past experience. So really understanding where those thoughts are coming from and diving into those, this is the basis for developing your EQ, for developing your personality, and for developing your success.
Great. That was so insightful, Taylor. So today we learned so many things. To begin with, we first understood that we need to be open about ourselves to ourselves. We need to understand where we come from. Then we start building our personality from ground up. So it's about connecting with yourself first. Then taking everything that's happening around you inside, absorbing what's happening, learning from it, and placing the good parts that relates to you, that communicates with you in your own self. Thereafter, I believe you have to have empathy. I think Taylor put it very well that once you can empathize with a person, that's the only way to communicate more effectively. Thank you so much for all the insights, Taylor.
Thank you.
And I would also like my listeners to know that Taylor runs a coaching program, and you can find her on multiple platforms. If you can share the platforms for us.
Would you like me to look directly in the camera when I do that? Yeah, okay. So yes, my brand name is called The Elegance Advisor. And we have the Elegance Advisor website, which is www.theeleganceadvisor.com. You can also reach us directly on Instagram. It's The Elegance Advisor. We have quite a bit of following. There's a lot of informative videos there as well. And you can send us a DM and we can be in contact. And we also have some coaching programs on the website as well.
Thank you so much, Taylor. Thank you, everybody who's listening to us today. If you feel that this podcast with Taylor and the talk about personality and confidence can help a friend, do share this with them. Stay tuned for more. Thank you.